Hi everyone! There is a new add-on for Blender called CURVEMachine, which has only been released about a week ago, and this add-on provides additional functionality and flexibility when working with curves in Blender, in particular with polycurves. The current version of the add-on is 1.0.0. It is available on Blender Market and Gumroad, and it currently costs $10. In this video, I will show you how to install the add-on, and we're going to have a quick look at the options we have in the preferences. Then I'm going to quickly introduce you to working with the add-on when using Bezier splines. There is only a very limited amount of things you can do with Bezier splines, as the main area of use for this add-on definitely is polycurves. And using the add-on with polycurves is what we're going to cover in the third part of this video. In the final part, I'm going to point out some shortcomings and things I think could be better in CURVEMachine. Right now, the version that is available is the initial release, so hopefully some of the things I mention at the end of this video will eventually be part of CURVEMachine. I will put links to the add-on in the video description. It is currently available on Blender Market and Gumroad. You can jump to the different chapters of this video at the bottom of the video. I've also put timestamps in the video description. And if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you would give it a thumbs up or maybe even subscribe to my channel. In order to install the add-on, you need to go to Edit Preferences, then go to the Add-ons tab, click on Install, and all you need to do is navigate to the folder where you stored the zip file. So this add-on comes as a zip file that you can download from Blender Market or Gumroad, depending on where you bought it. And all you need to do is select the zip file and hit the Install Add-on button. And there we go. In order to activate the add-on, just check the box here, and let's have a look at the options that we have. Here at the top you can see the description is the missing polycurve essentials. And this already indicates what the add-on actually is intended for, which is polycurves and not Bezier curves, although the add-on can be used with Bezier curves. So here you can see the current version. There also is a link to the documentation, which by the way is pretty good. It's not very complicated or very long because the add-on is not very complex, but it is a good documentation and worth having a look at if you have any questions. Under the Preferences section, we have two parts, one on the left. You can switch on and off these true/false buttons, but I would recommend keeping them as they are. Like MESHMachine, the shortcut or the main shortcut for accessing the add-on is the Y key. In CURVEMachine, the Y key also is used for splitting off vertices. One thing that can be useful is the HUD scale, so if you want this to be a little bit bigger or smaller, you can change that here. I'm going to set this to 1.1. We can ignore the 3D view options, and here at the bottom we have an option to change the number of default segments for the bevels. I'll leave this at the default of 6. Over here on the right you have the key maps. The only shortcut really that you need to remember is the first one, which brings up the main menu with all the available options, and that's the Y key, so that's the same as MESHMachine. As for the bevel option, you don't need to remember a new shortcut if you want to use the shortcuts here, because we have Ctrl B, which is what you basically use in polygon modeling for beveling edges, for example. The other shortcuts here, as far as I know, are consistent with the shortcuts in MESHMachine, so hopefully you won't need to relearn any of the shortcuts. In this video, I'm only going to use the menu and the Y key to access all of the functions of CURVEMachine, so I'm not going to worry about the shortcuts here. And that's pretty much everything there is to know about the preferences here. So let's close this window and let's have a look at how to use CURVEMachine with Bezier curves. In order to use CURVEMachine, we need a curve, of course. So let's go ahead and create a Bezier curve. Shift A, go to Curve and Bezier. And to be able to use the add-on, we need to be in edit mode. Right now we have 2 vertices. I'm going to subdivide those, so I have a couple more vertices I can work with here. Let's bring up the main menu by hitting the Y key. And here you can see all of the available options that we have. As you can see, most of these are grayed out for Bezier curves, so we can't add bevels, we cannot slide vertices, we can't merge vertices. And it's a pity we can't do that, because sometimes some of these options would be useful for Bezier curves. But it is what it is. Maybe this will change in future versions of CURVEMachine. The first option that actually is available is Interpolate. I will skip this option for now and explain it later when we use CURVEMachine with polycurves. The next option we have for Bezier curves is the Connect option. And this allows us to connect two curves. And there's one thing you need to bear in mind when you want to do that. Both curves need to be part of the same object. So for example, if I copy this curve and move it down a little bit and select both of them, go to edit mode, and let's say I want to connect these curves at this end over here. I can try and do that with the connect option, but as you can see, nothing happens. And that is because these two curves are separate objects. So what we need to do is select them both and hit Ctrl J to turn them into a single object. And now if I go to edit mode and select these two verts over here, I can use the connect option to connect these segments here. The next option we have is the cyclic option, and this will close the curve, as you can see. Then we have a depth option. Let me just go to my perspective view here. So we can use this to add depth like so. And once we've done that, if we open the menu again, we also have an option to change the resolution. So let's go ahead and increase that a little bit. Unfortunately, we can only increase the rotation segments here, but not the segments along the length of the curve. And I think the reason for that is because the tool was actually made to be used with polycurves. And with polycurves in Blender, there is really no option to add resolution to the length of the spline. If I want to add more resolution to the length of the curve, I need to go to the object data properties and change the option right here at the top that says resolution preview U, so I can change that and add more segments like that. This option also is available for polycurves, but it won't have any effect. We can also use CURVEMachine to extrude that curve like so. And maybe you've noticed I can only change one of the settings at a time, and then this menu will close again and I have to open it again to make another change. I can also left click on one of these options and enter a numerical value and then hit enter to confirm. Once I have clicked into one of these fields, I can't change to any of the other fields, so all I can do is either hit enter to confirm the number I've put in there or hit escape. In this case I'm going to hit enter, and this changes the setting accordingly. One thing that is a bit weird is that as far as these three settings here are concerned, you cannot use the undo function. When you use undo, it will change the resolution, which I've changed over here, and then it will go back to the original state of the two splines. So if you want to change everything back, you need to go in there and just set everything back to 0. The last option we have is the split option. Now in Blender you do have a split option, however with curves what will happen is if I split off these two vertices, I will create a separate object. For polygon objects that's a little different because I have a choice between keeping whatever I split off in the same object, or I can choose to create a separate object, but for curves it doesn't seem to be possible. And this is where CURVEMachine comes in handy because I can use the split option here and it will keep these vertices as part of the same object. So now I can move them around and select these two verts and, for example, connect these segments here and then maybe close that curve by using the cyclic option. And that is all the options that we have available when we use a CURVEMachine with Bezier curves. Let's move on and have a look at the fun part, which is using CURVEMachine with polycurves. Once you have installed CURVEMachine, you will find one additional option if you want to add a curve to your scene. So if I hit Shift and A and go to Curve, you will see this new option here right at the top. and it says single point polycurve. And this is a very small but very useful thing, because what this enables you to do is very quickly create a curve object with a single vertex. And once it's in the scene, you will also be in edit mode, and you can immediately, for example, control right click to extrude that vertex, or you can hit the extrude key and extrude a vertex. And the reason why this is a big thing is because what people used to do is add a mesh object, and if you have the extra objects activated, you can create a single vert. So that's kind of the same thing, but as you can see, that single vert is a mesh object. If I want to convert this to a curve, I have to actually, first of all, I have to go to edit mode and vertex mode, and then I can right click, control right click to create an additional vertex, or I can also hit the extrude key like before and create an additional vertex. And the reason why I need to do that is because I need at least 2 vertices in order to be able to convert this into a curve object. So now, as you can see in the outliner over here, now we have a curve, and we can go to the object data properties and add thickness and all of that stuff. And this is quite a few steps, and it's a bit of a pain. And with CURVEMachine, this process has become a lot faster now. If you want to work with polycurves, you can actually use most of the curves you have available here. And if you have the extra objects activated, you also have access to things like the curve spirals, like the Archimedean, for example, which can be used to create springs. So I can increase the number of turns and increase the height, and that is a polycurve. And all of the polycurves can be used with a CURVEMachine, of course. For this video, I'm going to keep it simple and create a rectangle or rectangle curve. I'll switch that to poly, and let's switch off cyclic. Okay, and that's all we need to do. Now what I can do is select a vertex, for example, use the Y key to open the CURVEMachine menu, and I can start working with these options. The menu looks slightly differently than before when we used it with Bezier curves. One thing you may notice is that we don't have an Interpolate option. We can use the Interpolate option with polycurves though, and I'm going to explain this at the end of this part. Let's start with the Blendulate option, which is the bevel option here. The shortcut is Ctrl B, which is the same shortcut you use in polygon modeling for beveling edges, for example. So let's go ahead and click on that. And all we need to do is move the mouse left or right to create the radius, which is called the amount here. And if I scroll the mouse wheel down, I can reduce the number of segments. If I scroll the mouse wheel up, I can increase the number of segments, and I can then left click to confirm the operation. I will have additional options down here in the operator panel, so we can still change the size of the bevel, we can change the segments, we can merge everything back to the corner, and we have one additional option here that we don't have when we interactively create this bevel here, and that is the tension. And you can use this to tighten the corner or to make it flat like this. And if you want to go back to the original curve, you can use this button with the car on the right. That's the auto tension, and this will reset the curve to the original setting. Now, the great part about CURVEMachine is that, like MESHMachine, you can reselect these vertices at any time, open CURVEMachine again, and change that bevel. So you can change the size, you can change the number of segments, and you can do that at any time. Let's go ahead and bevel this vertex here. Maybe let's reduce the segments a bit, make this a little bit smaller, something like this. So that's pretty cool. And to be honest, that alone is worth the price of this add-on. Now, the next option we have is the slide option. And in order to be able to use that, we need to select one vertex. If we select more than one, the option will not be available. Now let me just extrude this vertex over here, and I'll just move this one over to here a bit. With this vertex selected, you can hit the G key and freely slide it, but it won't slide along any of the lines of that curve here. If you want to do that, you can use the menu and pick the slide option, and you can see the shortcut is GG, which is the same as in polygon modeling. So I can do that, hit GG, and then I can slide along these lines here, which is also pretty cool. The next option we have is merge to last and merge to center. Right now these options are grayed out because in order for these to work, we need to select at least 2 vertices here. And if I open the menu again, you can see we only have one option, and that's because merge to last requires an active vertex. So I need to make one of these vertices, or one of the selected vertices, the active vertex. And now if I open the menu, you can see we have both options. So we can merge to last, or we can merge to center. Connect, I've already explained that with Bezier splines, and it's the same for polygon splines. You need 2. I keep saying splines. That's because I worked with Cinema 4D for many years, and in Cinema 4D curves are called splines. It's the same thing, just a different term. So anyway, if you want to use the connect option, we need 2 curves and they need to be part of the same object. And like I said, I already explained that with Bezier curves, so I'm not going to go over this again. Next we have gap shuffle. Now this can be useful, for example, if I go back a few steps. This can be useful if I want to add a bevel to one of these vertices, for example. Right now we can't do that because this is the start and end point of the curve, and we can't bevel that. If I bring up the blendulate option, I'm getting this error message here. CURVEMachine provides an option to move that start and end point of the curve using gap shuffle. If you click on that, let me just go over here and change that to none. So if you click on gap shuffle and scroll your mouse, you can move that gap to another position, which is pretty cool, and then you just left click to confirm. So now we have a regular segment over here, and with this vertex selected I can now add a bevel here. I could add one over here. Let's make this a little bit smaller and use fewer segments, and when I'm done I can move the gap back to the original position if I want to. So that's also pretty cool. The next option we have is cyclic. You can use this to close the spline or open the spline again. We also have the depth option here, so I can add some depth. I can change the resolution once I've added the depth, and I can also extrude the curve. So that's exactly the same as with Bezier curves. And as I explained, for Bezier curves, it would be nice to have a second resolution for changing the resolution along the length of the spline. But because CURVEMachine seems to be mainly focused on working with poly splines, my guess is that second resolution has not been added. If you take a look over here at the object properties, the resolution along the length of the spline is this one right at the top, resolution preview U. With a polycurve like this, changing the number here doesn't have any effect. This only works with Bezier splines. If I want to change any of the settings or go back to just the curve, I need to go to the menu and set everything back to 0. As I mentioned earlier, using undo will not work for this. The last option we have is split, and again this is the same as with Bezier curves. I need to select at least 2 vertices, open the menu and use split, and the vertices I have split off will stay part of the same object. And now I can, for example, connect these segments here. You can only connect one segment at a time, and then I can close that spline by using the cyclic option. And that's all of the options we have for polycurves. And there's one more thing I wanted to explain, which is the Interpolate option, which isn't available right now. Now, in order to demonstrate this, I need to at least extrude this curve, like so. And let's say I want to select these splines here, hit Alt S and scale them up a little bit. Actually, I'm just going to select this vertex here, hit Alt S and scale this up quite a bit, and I'm going to select this one and scale it down quite a bit, like so. And let's say I want a smooth transition from the lowest point to the highest point here. And that's what the interpolate function is for. And the way to do this is, for this particular example, you need to select all of the vertices and deselect the highest point and the lowest point. And then use the menu, and you can see we now have the interpolate option available here. So if I click on that, I will get a smooth transition from top to bottom. Actually, it's not super smooth. The reason for that is because we don't have a whole lot of geometry on the left and on the right and here at the front. So let's go ahead and change that. Just select this vertex here and scale it up a little bit more. And I'm going to select both of these vertices and subdivide them a couple of times. And I'll do the same thing over here. And let's subdivide these vertices here as well. Same procedure as before, select everything, deselect the highest point and the lowest point, and then use CURVEMachine and interpolate. And you can see now we're getting a much smoother transition from the lowest point to the highest point. You also get the operator panel down here. You can switch the interpolate radius off and on. You also have an interpolate tilt. Not sure what this does. I assume that this is for Bezier curves, and I think it has something to do with the rotation of the vertices on Bezier curves that can be interpolated. I haven't tried this before. If you're interested in how exactly this works, the documentation might be helpful in that respect. I haven't tried that. So anyway, that's basically what the interpolate feature is for. And that is all of the options that we have for polycurves. So this is a pretty cool tool and well worth its money, but it does have a few things that could be better, and I'm going to talk about those things in the last part of the video. CURVEMachine is a really nice tool that makes working with polysplines much more pleasant and much more flexible. It is so easy and fast to change any bevels you have added. I'm actually pretty happy with the tool as it is right now, but there are a few things that could be better, and I have a small wish list of things that I would like to see added to CURVEMachine in the future. Number one is the option to be able to bevel multiple vertices at the same time. Right now, if I select two vertices and try to bevel them, it's not possible. I'm getting this error message here. So it would be really cool to be able to bevel multiple vertices. Number two, it would be great to have a constraint option like you do with bevels in polygon modeling. If I bevel this vertex here, you can see there's no constraint option. At some point, the bevel just overshoots the points on the corners here. And also, along with a constraint option, it would be nice to have an option to automatically weld these vertices. I'm not sure if that's even possible with curves in Blender, but it would certainly be nice to be able to do that. Number three is I would like to see a mirror option in CURVEMachine. There is one in MESHMachine, and I really use that all the time. Of course, you can use a mirror modifier for curves, but let's say you want to make that mirror modifier editable. What you need to do in Blender is first convert this curve to a mesh object, and then you can apply the mirror modifier, and then you need to convert the object back to a curve, which is a bit of a pain. But again, this is something I'm not really sure if that's even possible in Blender. Number four, it would be super awesome if there was an align option. For example, if I move this vertex over and select these two and I want to line them up, the only thing I can do is use scaling on the y-axis to 0 to line these points up. And it's actually faster to do that in MESHMachine. For example, if I have these 2 points selected, I have a shortcut, and this is what I can do to line up these vertices. And it would be great to have a similar option for CURVEMachine. Number 5 and 6 I've already mentioned before in this video. Number 5 is it would be nice to be able to use the undo function in order to change the depth back to 0, for example, or at least have an option to reset everything to default, which you cannot do. Number 6 is I would like to have an additional option for a second resolution when working with Bezier splines. So that's it for this video. Let me know in the comments if you have the add-on. Do you like it? Do you hate it? What would you change? Which features would you like to add if you could? You can also hit me with any questions you might have, and I'll be happy to answer them if I can, or help you out if I can. If you've watched this video all the way to the end, please consider subscribing to my channel, or at least giving me a thumbs up for this video. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.